So we've heard about the past. We've seen a vision or a couple of visions for the future of this region. And I'm incredibly indebted to these Hojas. I've known Ege Hoja for 12, 13 years. He was my first friend from Cyprus. Jedan Hoja is my professor who oversaw my research. And you'll soon hear from Nafia Hoja, who has expanded on these ideas in ways that I think you'll find incredibly exciting. And what I am really excited to present is the idea that while we can understand the past and we can hope for a future, we work now. We work here. We work in the present day. And so the objectives that we'll be looking at for this quick presentation is the idea that you can actually relate to stories as a design tool, that you can actually inspire the community to sustain your building after you're finished. My background isn't nearly so much focused on academic. I'm a career architect. I've been doing this for 25 years. I got more projects than I want to count, working in a variety of different modes. And all of these clients become your friends. It's unavoidable. You spend a lot of time together. They tell you their desires, they tell you their joys, they tell you what they're interested in. And the challenge of that is that you need to make their program, their desires, a part of your project, but you are also being relied upon by the community to represent the community's desires, the community's needs. And you're licensed as a professional architect to come together those two issues, that you're going to make your client's program real, but then you're also going to make that project that results a part of the community. The sustainability is not green. Sustainability, the word means sustain. Your project needs to last after you've been paid, after you've gone on to your next project. You want to get paid, you have to keep working. You've set that project into the world and it has to live on its own. It has to enter into the community. And in that respect, you're kind of not so much a designer as you more are kind of the midwife. The client is the creator. They came to you with a project, with a program. And then you have to find a way to bring that project into the world so that you can have it be kept alive by the community, by the society. And you've had those kids in the neighborhood who are not polite, who are rude. You know, everyone talks about, no one likes that kid. And that kid grows up to be the old man who's angry and lonely, right? You don't want your project to be that old man. There is a wonderful example here in the walled city. This cafe this is 1961, but the building, the lower story was the cafe, upstairs was a political office, and the elementary school president, the principal, had a radio station. You could just make out the radio tower in the corner. And every day the dock workers would come up and set out their chairs out in the street, and then more would come up, and it would eventually close the street with everyone having their coffee, and it would meet the other cafes' street traffic from the Bandabulia. And then after the conflict, the North needed banks. We needed some place to store money securely. And so Ishbank said, okay, we'll build something here, but they built a fortress. They built a tank of a building, a place that was safe to store money. And it didn't quite fit in with those stories that the community had before. And as you can see, the whole time I lived here, it was for sale. The community had kind of abandoned it. And this is at the center of Famagusta. That's the cathedral in the background. That's the Buyut Jami. Lala Mustafa Pasha Jami is right there. This is at the turning post of the community. So today, now we actually have a cafe again. The community knew what it wanted. They knew the stories that they remembered. And so Mardo was very welcome to bring in a new cafe, and now new memories are being created here in Famagusta. But what is a local memory? How can we make that happen? That was by chance. That was obvious to do with this cafe. And what makes memory possible is that you can trigger the senses. Memories don't just happen. You see something, it reminds you. You smell something, it reminds you. You hear something, it reminds you. Memories are fundamentally attached to senses. If you don't have the reminders, you're probably going to forget. You don't have a reason to remember unless someone tells you. The world keeps going, keeps coming at you. Life keeps changing. But to remember means you need the reminders in that space. We need the historical components, and we need the points that remind people of their own stories. That senses are placed in space. That's why it's the sense of place. So when you're designing for a sense of place, you're talking about making memories come forward for people. Memories are how you remember where your home is. That's the big distinction that we would want to talk about here with working with stories. Because stories are throughout the community. And you don't know them because they're in the public's head. They're out there. And if you could make those memories that are in their head real, then there's a possibility that you could make your product, your building, polite and friendly because it reflects their stories. How do you actually begin to do that kind of an idea? What triggers a local memory? Well, those landmarks that people see, the things that they attach those memories to, the things that their senses trigger. We have a rough working model for what that could look like based off of how much people can walk in about 5 minutes. Just locating a memory in one spot isn't nearly so useful as recognizing that people move. Communities, like a person who lives in a neighborhood walks around the neighborhood. They don't just have a memory when they're standing in one spot. As soon as they can see something, the sense has triggered the memory, and the memory then arises. So there's a region of space that memories can be assigned to. And that gives us a really powerful tool to actually start to see memories as painted across the landscape. And then they can overlap. That is when a designer should perk up. Because when things overlap, you have an opportunity to blend ideas, to make ideas come together. In Famagusta, we have a modest narrative infrastructure, stories that are recorded and are available for use to help you bring the current memories, living memories. These are ethnographic interviews that were then coded for the location in the story, and then the story lives in its location on the map. This isn't a general story of Famagusta. This is a story for this Akule neighborhood. This is a story for the Jambalat neighborhood. So you know you're using the correct story because the story, like every story, has a setting. You know where the story takes place because they tell you where it takes place. So you can put it on the map. Equally, if you find a place that you don't have a story, and you might be working in a location where we don't have, lived stories already recorded, you can borrow stories from nearby. And you're a designer. You're not designing for yesterday, you're designing for tomorrow. That's good. But you can take those stories from different parts of the community and borrow some of the characters from here, borrow some of the themes from here, and incorporate them. Now, your new project is in continuity with the stories that came before. You can kind of think of it more like you're repairing the community a little bit. When you find those gaps, like a gap in a road, there's still sometimes that structure, that story structure that's underneath. And that's something you can anchor your project to, and you can begin to repair the holes in the community. What does that look like as a part of your design process? Now, you already have your usual things that you're used to working with: site, cultural material, program, precedent, etc. You know what your general tools are. What we're talking about is a new tool of stories, which is themes, actions, and characters. This is an overlay. This is an overlay that you would keep next to the rest of your design work. When you have to make a decision and you don't know what the right decision is, You know what the technical correct decision is, but what is the culturally correct decision? You just have the stories on a separate overlay, pull that over, or bring up that layer in AutoCAD and say, okay, let me come up with a community reason. I have to make a decision. Let's make a decision that's in continuity with the story. Borrow a character, borrow a theme. Is there a reason why the old lady who brings their dogs and walks through this neighborhood, could you provide a fountain that was low enough for a dog to drink out of? Now you've attached your project to their story. You've made an opportunity for them to remember and to extend their experience of their home, not lose it. So often architecture comes in, we call it urban renewal, and it bulldozes memory. People lose the things that remind them of their community. And it's like losing part of their brain. That's how destructive it can be. And so that's why it's important to use stories as part of your process. The setting doesn't change when you're working this way. You can retell the stories, though. You can play a what-if game. You can write a poem from their stories. You can change the hero. You could change who the victim is in the story. You could make them friends. Blend those nearby stories. You can take that story forward in time, just imagine it forward and then design that in. You are working with that material, that source material from the ethnographic interviews, and you can then incorporate those into your project. And a project plus their lived memories means that they will then adopt this child that you're bringing into the world. They will sustain it. You don't have the option to. You can do as much as you can with materials and selection of systems, but if you design an ugly bank, they may abandon it no matter how sustainable you thought it was technologically. If it's not culturally sustainable, then it's not going to carry forward in time in the community. So I actually got to finish a little early, but if you would like to use the stories that are already here, you can use this QR code. This will take you directly to the stories that are already mapped in a GIS format. And the other QR code is a method detailed out how you can make your own narrative infrastructure anywhere in the world. So with that, I will turn it over to Rafia Hoja.